All 6 of us are yours, dead neighbor's daughters told the rancher. The snow is deep. The cabin is silent. And the rancher finds his neighbor frozen stiff, rifle still in hand. But when the door creaks open, 6 trembling daughters step into the cold. Their voices shake as they whisper the words their dying father told them to say. All 6 of us are yours. He never asked for a family. His own house has been silent for years. But now 6 hungry faces look to him for survival. Just when he thinks he can protect them, a banker rides in with papers, claiming the girls will be scattered and the land taken. But hidden inside their father's trunk is a secret deed one that could change everything. The town whispers, the preacher warns, and the banker sharpens his claws. Winter closes in, and so does the law. Will this lonely rancher defy the powerful, guard the daughters, and keep the only family he has left? Or will the frontier tear him apart? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more snow swirled around Callie Danner as he guided his horse along the fence line, squinting against the biting wind. His gloved hands gripped the reins tight while he searched for breaks in the wire that might let his cattle stray. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystalline landscape, but something wasn't right. The smoke from Kent Crawford's chimney looked too thin for such a cold day. Callie pulled his coat collar higher and turned his horse toward the Crawford place. "Easy there, Scout," he murmured as the horse picked its way through the deepening drifts. The snow had fallen heavy last night, and the wind cut sharp enough to make his eyes water-dot as he drew closer. His stomach knotted. No tracks marked the pristine snow around the cabin. No sound of chopping wood or morning chores. Then he saw it, a dark shape by the woodpile. His heart dropped like a stone. "Kent?" he called out, spurring Scout forward. But even before he dismounted, he knew. Kent Crawford lay frozen in the snow, his rifle clutched in stiff fingers, his eyes staring sightless at the pale winter sky. A thin layer of snow dusted his coat and face. "Dear Lord," Callie whispered, kneeling beside his neighbor. Kent's skin felt like ice beneath his touch. He must have died sometime in the night, maybe trying to chase off wolves or check on his stock. Callie bowed his head, grief and shock warring in his chest. Kent hadn't been much older than himself. A creak behind him made him turn. The cabin door swung open, and 6 pale faces peered out. Callie's heart clenched at the sight of Kent's daughters, their eyes wide with fear and loss. He recognized Mercy, the eldest at 18, standing protectively in front of her younger sisters. We found him this morning," Mercy said, her voice trembling. She clutched little Susie close against her skirts. "But Papa told us what to do if anything happened to him." Callie stood slowly, snow falling from his coat. "I'll ride for the doctor, though it's too late, and then fetch the preacher." "No," Mercy interrupted, stepping forward. Though her lips quivered, her chin lifted with determination. "All 6 of us are yours now." The words hit Callie like a physical blow. "What?" "Papa said so, 11-year-old," Anna whispered from behind Mercy. "He made us promise. He said you were the only one who wouldn't sell the land out from under us." 13-year-old Ruth added, her arms wrapped around 9-year-old Lydia and another sister. "Or send us to different homes." Callie shook his head, his mind reeling. "Now wait a minute. Kent never said anything to me about." "He wrote it down," Mercy insisted. She disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a worn envelope. "It's all legal. He had Mr. Peterson, the lawyer, write it up last summer when he first took sick." Snow drifted down harder. As Callie stared at the paper, she thrust toward him. His hand shook as he unfolded it, recognizing Kent's scraggly signature at the bottom of a formal document naming him legal guardian of all 6 Crawford daughters. "This can't be right," he protested. "I'm not fit to raise 6 girls." I live alone. The words stuck in his throat as he looked at their hopeful, frightened faces. There must be someone else. Your mama's people back east. They never answered Papa's letters, Mercy said quietly. And we don't want to leave the ranch. It's our home. Little Susie began to cry, pressing her face into Mercy's skirts. The sound pierced Collie's heart, reminding him of his own loss years ago. His Sarah would have known what to do. But Sarah was gone, taken by fever, leaving him alone these past 5 years. The wind picked up, driving the snow harder. Collie looked at Kent's body, then at the thin smoke from the chimney. These girls had been alone with their dead father since dawn, trying to be brave. You all get back inside, he said gruffly. Fire's about out. I'll bring in more wood. Relief flooded Mercy's face. Ruth, take Susie in. Anna, put the kettle on. Lydia, find some blankets. She moved with quiet efficiency, shepherding her sisters back into the cabin. Collie stood for a moment in the swirling snow, overwhelmed by what lay before him. 6 girls. Kent had trusted him with 6 precious lives. The weight of it pressed on his shoulders like a heavy yoke dot inside the cabin. He found the wood box nearly empty. While the girls huddled together, he made several trips to stock it full, then built up the fire until warmth began to seep back into the cold room. All the while, his mind churned with questions and doubts. What did he know about raising girls? He could manage cattle, mend fences, break horses. But these were children who needed more than just food and shelter. They needed guidance, education, a mother's touch. Everything he couldn't give them. Yet as he watched Mercy moving about the cabin, eating soup and comforting her sisters, he saw Kent's wisdom. These girls already knew how to be a family. They just needed someone to protect that family, to give them a chance to stay together on the land they loved. Mr. Danner? Mercy's soft voice broke into his thoughts. She held out a cup of coffee, her hand steady now, though her eyes were red-rimmed. Papa always said you were a man of your word. That's why he trusted you with us. Collie took the cup, noting how the other girls watched him with mixture of hope and fear. Ruth, trying to be brave as she held Susie in her lap. Anna, quiet and pale beside the stove. Lydia, humming softly to herself the way she always did at church. And between them, the unspoken question, would he honor their father's trust? The coffee was strong and hot, just the way Kent always made it. Collie remembered countless mornings sharing a cup with his neighbor, talking about rainfall and cattle prices, never knowing Kent was planning this. Never guessing he'd be standing here, watching the snow fall outside while 6 pairs of eyes waited for his answer. He set the cup down and cleared his throat. Your papa was right about one thing. I am a man of my word. He met Mercy's gaze. If this is what Kent wanted, then I'll do my best by you all. But there'll have to be changes. My place is bigger, better built for a family. We can help with the work, Ruth offered quickly. I'm good with horses, and Anna knows about chickens. Collie held up his hand. We'll figure all that out later. Right now, ... double quotes. He glanced at Kent's body, visible through the window. Right now, we need to tend to your father proper. Mercy's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. The ground's frozen solid. We'll need help digging. I'll ride for the neighbors once the snow lets up, Collie assured her. The Petersons and Wilsons will come. Kent was well-liked. He paused, then added quietly, he was a good man. He tried to be, Mercy whispered, and something in her voice told Collie there were burdens these girls carried that he didn't yet understand. But that would come later. For now, they needed warmth and safety and the knowledge that they wouldn't face tomorrow alone. Little Susie slipped from Ruth's lap and came to stand beside him, her small hand finding his. Papa said you'd take care of us, she said simply, with a child's complete faith. Collie looked down at those trusting eyes, then at each of the faces watching him. The responsibility Kent had laid on him was enormous, but so was the gift of these 6 brave hearts. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "Yes," he said softly, squeezing Susie's hand. "That's exactly what I'm going to do." The morning dawned bitter cold, with frost etching delicate patterns on the cabin windows. Collie had spent the night in Kent's chair by the fire, watching over the girls who huddled together under quilts on the floor. None of them had slept much as the weak winter sun crept over the horizon. Collie stepped outside to assess the day. The snow had stopped, leaving a pristine white blanket across the landscape. Near the creek where Kent had always liked to fish, the ground would be softer for digging. He returned inside to find Mercy already up, trying to coax life back into the dying embers. "We'll bury him by the creek," Collie said softly, not wanting to wake the others just yet. "Your pa always said that was his favorite spot." Mercy nodded, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. "He used to take us fishing there in summer," said. The sound of running water helped him think clear. By mid-morning, Collie had managed to break through the frozen ground with help from his pickaxe. The hole wasn't as deep as he would have liked, but it would have to do. The girls gathered around as he and 16-year-old Clara wrapped Kent's body in his best blanket. Little Susie clutched at Clara's skirts, her small face streaked with tears. Anna and Lydia held hands tightly, while Ruth stood straight back beside Mercy, trying to be strong for her younger sisters. Collie cleared his throat, Kent's worn Bible heavy in his hands. "The Lord is my shepherd," he began, his steady voice carrying across the still morning air. "I shall not want." The familiar words seemed to give the girls something to hold on to. Mercy and Clara moved closer to him, drawing strength from his presence as he continued the psalm. When he finished, silence fell, broken only by quiet sobs from the younger ones. "Your pa was a good neighbor," Collie said finally. "He worked hard and loved his children fierce. The Lord will welcome him home." He paused, then added, "Would any of you like to say something?" Mercy stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Thank you, Papa, for loving us enough to make sure we'd be cared for. We promise to make you proud." After the last prayer was said and the frozen earth piled back, Collie turned to practical matters. "We need to pack what we can carry. The wagon won't hold everything, but we'll come back for the rest when weather permits." Inside the cabin, the girls moved with quiet efficiency. Mercy and Clara directed their younger sisters, gathering the essentials: warm quilts, cooking pots, family treasures. Ruth carefully wrapped their mother's china plates in soft cloths, while Anna collected the few books they owned. "The Bible goes in first," Mercy insisted, taking the worn volume from Collie's hands and wrapping it reverently in a clean cloth. Papa read from it every night. Collie watched them work, noting how even little Susie helped by carrying small bundles to the wagon. These girls knew how to work together, how to make do with little. It would serve them well in the days ahead. Loading the wagon took most of the morning. Collie hitched his horse and made sure the girls were bundled up as warm as possible before they set out. The younger ones huddled together under quilts in the wagon bed, while Mercy and Clara sat up front with him. The journey to his ranch was slow going. Snowdrifts blocked the usual trail in places, forcing them to take a longer route. The wagon wheels creaked through the fresh snow, and their breath came out in white puffs in the cold air. "It's not far now," Collie assured them as the sun began its descent. He could see Lydia and Anna shivering despite the quilts, and little Susie had fallen into an exhausted sleep against Ruth's shoulder. Mercy kept glancing back at her sisters, worry clear on her face. "They'll be all right," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "We're together. That's what matters." As dusk approached, they finally crested the last rise that overlooked Collie's ranch. The 2-story cabin sat dark and quiet. Smoke from the morning's fire long since disappeared from the chimney. His barn stood solid against the darkening sky, and the cattle huddled in the sheltered pasture below, It's bigger than our place, Clara observed quietly. Built it thinking I'd have a family someday, Callie replied, then fell silent. Memories of Sarah threatening to overwhelm him. The girl said nothing, but Mercy laid a gentle hand on his arm for just a moment before turning to help her sisters climb down from the wagon. Inside, the cabin felt cold and empty, despite being larger than the Crawfords' home. Callie busied himself with the fire while the girls explored the rooms. Their soft footsteps overhead made the old floorboards creak in unfamiliar ways. There's 3 bedrooms up there, he called out. You'll have to share, but there's space enough. Soon, the smell of cornmeal cakes filled the air as Clara took charge of the kitchen. She'd found his cast iron skillet and some supplies, and moved about as if she'd always cooked there. The other girls began spreading quilts on beds, arranging their few possessions, making the strange space feel more familiar. Callie sat at the head of his long empty table, watching as the sisters slowly transformed his bachelor home. Lydia's quiet humming mixed with the clatter of plates as Ruth and Anna set the table. Little Susie had already claimed a corner by the fire, where she sat playing with her rag doll. It's not much, Clara apologized as she set a plate of hot cakes before him. But tomorrow I can make biscuits if there's flour. These are fine, Callie assured her, his voice gruff with emotion he couldn't quite name. The simple meal tasted better than anything he'd eaten in years, seasoned by the sounds of children's voices and the warmth of shared food. Come spring, when court convenes, we'll sort this all proper, he felt compelled to say, though the words sounded hollow even to his ears. This is just temporary, mind. The girls exchanged glances but said nothing. Mercy calmly poured coffee into his cup, while Clara served her sisters. They moved around his table as if they'd always been there, as if Kent's last wish had already made them a family. Callie looked down at his plate, overwhelmed by the chatter and life filling his once quiet home. 6 pairs of eyes watched him with hope and trust, waiting to see if he would truly become the guardian their father had chosen. The weight of that responsibility pressed heavy on his shoulders, but as little Susie smiled at him across the table, he felt something else too, a warmth he hadn't known since Sarah died. The first stirrings of possibility died outside. Snow began falling again, softly blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire crackled warmly as the Crawford girls began to make Callie's house their home. Whether he was ready for it or not, dawn painted the eastern sky in pale gold when Callie stepped out onto his front porch. Frost glittered on the fence posts, and his breath clouded in the crisp morning air. The familiar stillness of early morning felt different now, knowing 6 young lives slept under his roof. He headed toward the barn, already planning the day's work when movement caught his eye. A small figure carried milk pails across the yard. Mercy Crawford, wrapped in a shawl against the cold, disappeared into the barn ahead of him. Inside, he found her perched on the milking stool beside his old brown cow, her hands moving with practiced ease. The steady rhythm of milk hitting the pail filled the quiet barn. "Been up long?" he asked, keeping his voice low to avoid startling either girl or cow. "Since first light," Mercy replied, not pausing in her work. "Clara's getting breakfast started." "The little ones should be up soon," Callie nodded, oddly unsettled by her quiet competence. He'd expected to need to teach them everything, but clearly Kent had raised his daughters to work. When he returned to the house, warmth and the smell of coffee greeted him. Clara stood at the stove, her face flushed from the heat as she stirred a pot of porridge. Ruth and Anna worked together sweeping the floors, while Lydia helped Susie make up the beds upstairs, their feet pattering overhead. "Morning, Mr. Danner," Clara said softly. "Coffee's hot if you'd like some." He poured himself a cup, watching as the girls moved around his kitchen with surprising efficiency. The worn floorboards, which had known only his solitary footsteps for so long, now creaked under multiple pairs of feet. "You all seem to know your way around chores," he observed. Clara nodded. adding a pinch of salt to the porridge. "Papa taught us early," said idle hands weren't any use to anyone. Over the next few days, the girls settled into life at the Danner Ranch as if they'd always been there. They established their own rhythms, Mercy and Clara sharing the cooking and heavier work, Ruth minding the younger ones, Anna taking special care of the animals. Even little Susie helped where she could, toddling after her sisters with determined helpfulness. The changes to Kaylee's ordered life both unsettled and warmed him. His once silent evenings now filled with hymn singing, the girls' voices rising sweet and clear in the lamplight. Clara taught Lydia to knit by the fire, while Mercy helped Ruth with her letters. Anna would often curl up with a book, Susie dozing against her shoulder. Just until spring, Callie reminded them, and himself, each night. "When the pass is clear, we'll sort this proper at the county court." But watching them work and laugh together, seeing how they protected and cared for each other, made his words ring hollow. Still, he kept his distance, afraid to let himself grow too attached. The memory of Sarah's death still ached, making him wary of opening his heart again. On the fourth morning, as Clara served breakfast and Mercy divided up the day's tasks, a sharp knock rattled the front door. The sound echoed through the quiet kitchen like a gunshot. Callie opened the door to find Mr. Wilkes on his porch, the banker's city clothes stark against the rustic backdrop of the ranch. His horse, still steaming from hard riding, stood tied to the hitching post. "Danner," Wilkes nodded curtly. "May I come in?" "Business to discuss." Callie stepped back, noting how the girls grew still and watchful as the banker entered. Even little Susie seemed to sense the tension. Pressing close to Clara's skirts, Wilkes removed his hat, but remained standing, his eyes taking in the domestic scene before him. "I see the rumors are true then. You've taken in Kent Crawford's girls." "Temporary arrangement," Callie said firmly. "Until spring court." "Ah." Wilkes pulled a folded paper from his coat. "That may present a problem. You see, Crawford left considerable debts. The bank holds notes on his property, land, stock, equipment. All of it." Mercy stepped forward, her face pale but composed. "Our father was an honest man. He always paid what he owed." "Honest, perhaps," Wilkes conceded with a thin smile, "but not particularly good with money. The drought hit him hard these past 2 years. He borrowed heavy, missed payments. The bank has rights to everything he owned. The girls aren't property," Callie said quietly, but with steel in his voice. "No, but they are now technically orphans." Wilkes straightened his vest. "Without a legal guardian, they become wards of the county. The court would need to approve any fostering arrangement, after proper review, of course. Good Christian families in town would surely be willing to take them in. 1 or 2 each, spread around ... No. The cry came from multiple throats. Clara clutched Susie tighter while Ruth and Anna grabbed each other's hands. Lydia began to cry silently. Mercy stood very straight, though her hands trembled. "Our father chose Mr. Danner as our guardian. He trusted him to keep us together. A deathbed arrangement carries no legal weight," Wilkes said smoothly. "Without proper documentation, approved by the court ... double quotes." He spread his hands in a gesture of false helplessness. "The bank must protect its interests. If Mr. Danner is housing you illegally, that could complicate matters considerably." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Callie felt the girls' fear like a physical thing, saw their dreams of staying together crumbling under Wilkes's cold logic. He thought of Kent Crawford, dying in the snow but making sure his daughters would have someone to turn to. He thought of Sarah, and how she would have opened her heart to these girls without hesitation. Before he could speak, Wilkes continued. "Of course, arrangements might be made. If someone were willing to assume Crawford's debts along with guardianship, but that would be quite a burden for a single man to take on." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll give you time to consider your options. The bank will expect a decision soon, He placed his hat back on his head with precise movements. "Good day to you all. I'll see myself out." The door closed behind him with terrible finality. In the silence that followed, Susie began to sob, her small shoulders shaking. Clara tried to comfort her while fighting back her own tears. Ruth and Anna clung together, white-faced, while Lydia pressed her face into Mercy's skirts. Mercy alone remained outwardly calm, though her voice shook slightly as she spoke. "Mr. Danner, we understand if you can't. If it's too much to ask, ... Kali looked at their faces, 6 pairs of eyes filled with fear and fading hope. Ken's daughters. Sarah would have known what to do. Sarah would have ... but Sarah wasn't here. He was. And these girls needed someone to stand between them and the cold calculations of men like Wilkes. He cleared his throat roughly. "Finish your breakfast," he said. "Then, Mercy, you and Clara help me check the north pasture fence. Ruth, mind your sisters. We've got work to do." After Wilkes's departure, a heavy silence hung in the kitchen. Mercy stood motionless for a long moment, then suddenly turned and hurried to the corner where their father's old trunk sat. The other girls watched as she knelt before it, fingers working the worn brass latch. "Mercy?" Callie asked, moving closer. "What are you doing?" "Pa showed me something," she said, voice tight with determination. "The night before he died. Said to keep it safe until we needed it most." She lifted out their mother's faded shawl, carefully wrapped around something. As she unfolded the fabric, a sealed envelope emerged, the paper yellowed but intact. Written across the front in Kent Crawford's rough hand were the words, "Last will and testament." Collie's breath caught. "Your pa had a proper will?" Mercy nodded, holding out the envelope with trembling fingers. "He rode all the way to Mason City last fall to have it witnessed proper. Said he wanted everything legal and binding, just in case. ... Double Colts Collie took the envelope carefully, aware of 6 pairs of eyes fixed on him. The younger girls gathered close, Ruth and Anna pressing against his sides while Lydia and Susie clung to his sleeves. "Please read it, Mr. Danner," Clara whispered. "Please." He broke the seal and unfolded the document. The lamplight flickered across official-looking writing, complete with stamps and signatures. Clearing his throat, he began to read aloud. "I, Kent Crawford, being of sound mind, do hereby set down my final wishes regarding my property and the guardianship of my 6 daughters. ... Double quotes. The legal language was dense, but the meaning clear. Kent had left everything, land, stock, and most importantly, his daughters, in Kaylee Danner's care. Moreover, the document detailed shared water rights to the creek that bordered their properties, making them equal partners in its use. Pa said you were the only one he could trust," Mercy explained softly. "Said you knew the value of water rights, and you'd never sell them off cheap like some might." Collie stared at Kent's signature, remembering conversations over fence mending, shared work during Roundup, quiet words about raising daughters alone. He hadn't realized how deeply his neighbor had trusted him. Little Susie tugged at his sleeve. "Does this mean we can stay? The banker man can't take us away." Callie looked down at her hopeful face, then at each of the others in turn. "This paper needs to go before the county judge," he said carefully. "But until then... He folded the document and tucked it securely in his shirt pocket. "I'll keep it safe, and I'll stand by your pa's wishes." The relief in the room was palpable. Susie threw her arms around his waist, and the other young ones followed suit. Even Mercy's shoulders relaxed slightly, though her eyes remained worried. Over the next days, Callie began showing the girls more about running the ranch. They took to the work naturally, as if their father's capability flowed in their blood. Mercy proved quick with figures, helping him calculate feed requirements for the expanding herd. Clara's gentle way with animals made her valuable in the barn, While Ruth's endless energy suited her to fence mending, they fell into a rhythm, the girls rising early to help with chores. Anna discovered she had a talent for spotting sick animals before symptoms became severe. Lydia's cheerful humming kept spirits up during long hours of work. Even little Susie found ways to help, carrying tools and water to the others. The meals changed too. Where Kali had been content with basic fare, the girls brought life back to his kitchen. The smell of fresh bread and stewed meat filled the house, reminding him of Sarah's cooking in a way that ached but didn't hurt quite as sharply as before. One Sunday morning, as they prepared for a quiet day of rest, hoofbeats approached the house. Kali stepped onto the porch to find Reverend Hodges dismounting, his circuit rider's coat dusty from the trail. "Brother Danner," the preacher smiled warmly, "I heard news about your expanded household. Thought I might stop by with some scripture and fellowship." The girls welcomed him eagerly, setting an extra place at the table while Clara poured fresh coffee. The Reverend broke bread with them, listening as they explained about Kent's will and Wilkes's threats. After the meal, while the younger ones cleared the table, Reverend Hodges drew Callie aside. They stood on the porch, watching the sun climb higher over the prairie. "Remarkable thing," the preacher said quietly, "how the Lord works in mysterious ways. A man loses his family, lives alone with his grief. Then one morning, 6 young souls appear on his doorstep, needing exactly what he has to give." Kali shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not looking to replace anyone, Reverend. No one's suggesting that." Hodges' voice was gentle. "But perhaps the good Lord isn't asking you to replace what was lost. Maybe he's offering something new entirely, a family not chosen by you, but entrusted to your care." Inside, they could hear the girls singing as they worked, their voices lifting in familiar hymns. The sound filled the house in a way Callie had almost forgotten was possible. "Kent knew what he was doing," Hodges continued. "He saw in you what these girls needed: strength, integrity, and a heart big enough to heal alongside theirs." He patted Kaylee's shoulder. "Just something to consider, brother." Callie remained on the porch long after the preacher rode away, watching the girls move about their tasks. Mercy sat with Susie, patiently teaching her letters. Clara and Anna tended the kitchen garden while Ruth and Lydia fed the chickens. The scene stirred something in his chest, not the sharp pain of loss, but a warming ember of possibility. He touched the will in his pocket, feeling the weight of Kent's trust. His neighbor had seen something in him, something beyond the grief-hardened widower he'd become, something worth betting 6 precious lives on. The sound of the girls' laughter drifted out to him, and for the first time in years, the echo of it didn't make his house feel empty. Instead, it filled spaces he'd forgotten existed, like spring rain soaking into drought-parched earth. The winter days settled into a gentle rhythm at the Danner Ranch. Each morning, Callie would wake to find Mercy already at the kitchen table, bent over the household ledgers with the same determination her father had shown during cattle counts. Her careful columns tracked every cup of flour, every egg, making their supplies stretch through the lean months. Clara proved herself a marvel in the kitchen, transforming simple ingredients into meals that filled the house with warmth. The younger girls took to their tasks with surprising cheer, Ruth and Anna racing each other to gather eggs, while Lydia and Susie collected kindling, singing hymns as they worked. One evening, as February winds howled outside, Callie returned from the barn to find all 6 girls gathered around the kitchen table. Mercy had spread out scraps of wool and old blankets, showing the younger ones how to cut and stitch them into mittens. "See here, Susie," she demonstrated, her voice patient. "The thread needs to be good and tight, or the cold will creep in." Clara guided Anna's hands as she struggled with a particularly thick piece. "That's it, just like that. These will keep your fingers warm during morning chores." Lydia hummed softly while she worked, her stitches uneven but earnest. Ruth's tongue poked out in concentration as she matched up pieces, determined to make hers as neat as Mercy single quotes S. Callie stood in the doorway, something catching in his throat at the sight. The lamplight cast a gentle glow over their bent heads, highlighting how they leaned toward each other, sharing warmth and wisdom passed down from their mother. Their care for one another showed in every small gesture. Mercy threading needles for the little ones, Clara praising each wobbly stitch, the younger girls trading scraps in their favorite colors. When Sunday came, Callie hitched up the wagon to take them all to church. He'd noticed the looks and whispers in town growing stronger each week. Some nodded approvingly at how the girls' clothes were neat and mended, their hair braided tight. Others cast sideways glances, muttering about propriety and a single man raising 6 young girls. Callie handled it the only way he knew how, with quiet dignity. He helped each girl down from the wagon carefully, then escorted them into church with proper respect. The girls sat together in their usual pew, backs straight and faces forward, while Callie took his place in the back, standing rather than sitting as was his habit. Reverend Hodges stood at the pulpit, his voice carrying clear through the small church. Today's reading comes from the book of James, chapter 1, verse 27, he announced. Then read, "Pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, and to keep oneself unspotted from the world." The words seemed to hang in the air, and Callie felt several gazes turn his way. The Reverend continued his sermon, speaking about duty and compassion, about how true faith showed itself in actions more than words. Though he never looked directly at Callie, his meaning was clear to everyone present. After the service, as people filed out into the cold sunshine, several of the church ladies made a point of greeting the Crawford girls warmly. Mrs. Peterson even pressed a jar of preserved peaches into Clara's hands, while her husband clapped Callie on the shoulder with gruff approval. That evening, after the younger girls had gone to bed, Mercy found Callie on the porch. He was checking the thermometer, worried about a coming frost. "Mr. Danner," she said softly, wrapping her shawl tighter. "I wanted to thank you." He turned, surprised. "What for?" "For ... double quote." She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "For the way you've handled everything. The talk in town, the way some folks look at us. You've protected our dignity through it all." Callie shifted uncomfortably, unused to such direct gratitude. "Ain't nothing more than your pa would have expected. It's more than that," Mercy insisted. "You could have sent us to the county home, or split us up among different families. Instead, you've given us a home, kept us together. Let us keep our pride." Something flickered in Callie's chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Before he could respond, Mercy had slipped back inside, leaving him to ponder her words in the gathering dusk. 3 days later, as morning fog still clung to the creek bottom, hoofbeats approached the house. Callie stepped out to find Henry Tolbert, his Comanche neighbor, riding up with a fresh-killed deer across his saddle. "Brother," Henry greeted him, dismounting smoothly. His English was clear and precise, though he spoke with the measured cadence of his people. "I bring meat to share, and news you should hear." Callie helped him hang the deer from the barn beam, noting how the girls watched curiously from the kitchen window. They'd seen Henry before, during joint roundups with their father, but hadn't spoken much with him. As they worked to dress the deer, Henry spoke quietly. "The banker Wilkes, he makes plans for the creek." Railroad men were at his office 2 days past, talking about water rights and diversion channels. Callie's hands stilled on the knife. "Diversion? That creek feeds both our ranches. Kent's too. Now his girls are with me." Henry nodded gravely. "The railroad hungers for water to feed their iron horses. Wilkes sees profit in serving them, more than in respecting the old agreements." He gestured toward the house. "I see Kent's daughters found shelter with you. This is good. A man should protect those in his care. They're not really mine," Callie said automatically, but the words felt less certain than before. A wolf does not question if cubs are his by blood when they need protection. Henry replied simply. He wrapped several choice cuts of venison in clean cloth. I will testify, if needed, about how long our families have shared the creek. Some papers care more about white man's words than Indians, but truth is truth. Callie gripped his friend's arm in thanks. Much obliged, Henry, for the meat and the warning both. We are neighbors, Henry said, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. He mounted up, then paused. Those girls, they bring life back to your house. I hear their songs on the wind sometimes. Good medicine for a lonely heart. Before Callie could respond, Henry had turned his horse toward home, leaving Callie to ponder how his quiet ranch had become the center of so much concern, both friendly and otherwise. Inside, he could hear the girls exclaiming over the fresh venison, Clara already planning what to cook while Mercy calculated how to preserve the rest. Looking from Henry's departing figure to the warm light of his kitchen window, Callie felt that same flicker of belonging grow stronger. Whatever Wilkes was planning, he wouldn't face it alone. Henry's dark eyes fixed on Callie as they stood beside the creek, its waters running thin beneath a crust of late winter ice. If Wilkes gains control of these waters, both your ranch and the Crawford land will wither come summer, he said gravely. The railroad's thirst never ends. They take until nothing remains. Callie squinted at the flowing water, remembering countless seasons when this creek had sustained not just his cattle, but Kent's too. Now those same waters needed to support 6 more lives. How much time do we have? Railroad men speak of laying track by autumn. They will want water rights secured before then. Henry gestured upstream. My people have seen this before. First the water goes, then the land dies, then families must move. Back at the house, Callie pulled Kent's deed from the tin box where he kept important papers. The girls gathered around as he spread it on the kitchen table, careful of the worn creases. Mercy leaned in, her finger tracing the careful script that detailed water rights shared between the 2 properties. Pa always said this. Creek was our lifeline, she said softly. He and Mr. Danner worked out the sharing years ago, before any of us were born. Callie nodded, studying the legal language. Your pal was smart, getting it all written proper. This here's our strongest shield against Wilkes and his railroad friends. But will it be enough? Clara asked, worry creasing her young forehead. Has to be, Callie replied, though doubt gnawed at his insides. He'd never been one for legal battles or facing down wealthy men. But looking at the 6 faces around him, he knew he had no choice but to fight. That evening, after prayers, the girls huddled together whispering. The next morning, Mercy approached Callie as he mended tack in the barn. We've been thinking, she began, twisting her apron in her hands, about how to show folks we're a proper family now. What if we held a barn raising? Your hay shed's been sagging something awful, and with spring coming ... Callie glanced at the old shed. It did need work, but a gathering? Don't know about that. Folks are already talking plenty. Exactly, Clara chimed in from the doorway. So let them talk about something good. We'll cook and clean and make everything nice. Show them how we can run a proper household. The younger girls crowded in behind their sisters, faces eager. Please, Mr. Danner, Ruth pleaded. We can play music and sing hymns. Anna and I have been practicing on Pa's fiddle. Lydia bounced on her toes. I can help Clara bake pies. Looking at their hopeful faces, Callie felt his resistance crumbling. Maybe they had the right of it. Better to face the gossip head on than hide away. Reckon we could use the help with that shed, he admitted finally. The girls' cheers echoed off the barn walls. Over the next week, the ranch hummed with preparation. The girls scrubbed the house from top to bottom, while Callie gathered lumber and tools. Clara and Mercy planned enough food to feed 20 people, though they worried more might come. Invitations went out through church networks and neighbor visits. The appointed Saturday dawned clear and cool. By mid-morning, wagons began arriving. First came the Petersons, then the Johnsons, followed by several families from church. Even Sheriff Matthews rode up, his usually stern face curious. The girls had transformed the ranch yard. Clean tablecloths fluttered on rough-hewn tables, while early spring flowers brightened tin cans used as vases. Delicious smells wafted from the kitchen, where Clara supervised 3 different pies cooling on the WINDOWSIL. Mercy greeted each arrival with grace, directing the men to where Kaylee had laid out tools and lumber, while showing the women to refreshments. The younger girls flitted about serving coffee and lemonade, their Sunday dresses pristine. Work on the shed progressed steadily, punctuated by laughter and friendly competition between the men. Kali found himself relaxing as neighbors praised his clean joints and straight walls. When Ruth and Anna struck up a tune on their fiddles, several workers began keeping time with their hammers. At midday, Clara rang the dinner bell. The crowd gathered around loaded tables, falling silent as Mercy rose to speak. "We want to thank you all for coming today," she began, her voice clear and steady. "When our father died this winter, we feared we'd lose everything: our home, each other, our place in this community. But Mr. Danner took us in, giving us shelter and purpose. Through him, God has shown us that family isn't just about blood, but about choosing to care for one another." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Several of the church ladies dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. Callie stood awkward and uncertain until Clara gently tugged him to his feet. "I'm not one for speeches," he said gruffly, "but I'm grateful for all your help today. These girls ... double quotes." He paused, looking at each of their faces. "They've brought life back to this old place. Made it a home again. Much obliged to you all for supporting us." "Hear, hear," called Sheriff Matthews, raising his coffee cup. Others joined in, and soon the air filled with conversation and laughter. The afternoon passed in a blur of work and fellowship. The younger girls organized games for visiting children, while Lydia's sweet voice led everyone in familiar hymns. Even 6-year-old Susie helped, carefully carrying water to thirsty workers. As evening approached and the new shed stood straight and proud, families began hitching up their wagons. May stopped to praise the girls' hospitality and Callie's guidance. Sheriff Matthews lingered until most had gone. "Fine family you've got here, Danner," he said, watching the girls clean up. "Been a long time since this ranch felt so alive. Does my heart good to see it." "They're good girls," Callie replied simply. "That they are. You need anything, dealing with the bank or such, you let me know." The sheriff's meaning was clear. The community stood with them. After the last wagon disappeared down the road, Callie sat on the porch, listening to the girls' tired but happy chatter as they put away the last dishes. The new shed stood solid against the darkening sky, a testament to what could be accomplished when people came together. For the first time since Kent's death, Callie felt truly hopeful. Maybe they could weather whatever storm Wilkes was brewing. Maybe this makeshift family could become something real and lasting. That night, as quiet settled over the ranch, Callie lay in his bed feeling more at peace than he had in years. The sound of Mercy softly singing the younger ones to sleep drifted through the walls, as familiar now as his own breathing. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the creek valley, the same creek he now knew they would fight together to protect. The following week dawned cold and gray. Callie was checking fence posts near the creek when he heard horses approaching. Through the morning mist, he spotted 5 riders wearing Wilkes's Railroad Company badges. They carried wooden posts and coils of barbed wire. His stomach tightened as he watched them dismount and begin pounding stakes into the frozen ground along the creek bank. The metallic ring of hammers on metal posts echoed across the water. Callie urged his horse forward. "Hold up there," he called out, keeping his voice steady. This here's shared water rights between the Crawford and Danner ranches. The lead man, a weather-beaten fellow named Tucker, barely glanced up. Not no more it ain't. He pulled a folded paper from his vest. Mr. Wilkes holds legal claim now. Says right here. That's impossible. Collie dismounted, boots crunching on frozen grass. I've got Kent Crawford's deed showing different. Well then, Tucker drawled. Reckon you best take that up with the bank. He turned back to his work, dismissing Collie entirely. Heat rose in Collie's chest. He stepped closer, hand resting near his belt. I'm telling you to stop. This creek waters both ranches. As for 20 years. The other men set down their tools, spreading out slightly. Tucker straightened, eyes hard. And I'm telling you to back off, Danner. Unless you want trouble. Already got trouble, Collie replied quietly. The minute you started putting up fence where it don't belong. Tucker's hand drifted toward his holster. The air grew thick with tension as both men stared each other down. The creek gurgled softly behind them, oblivious to the dispute over its waters. Perhaps we should all take breath before blood is spilled. The calm voice cut through the tension. Henry Tolbert sat atop his paint horse on a small rise, rifle balanced across his saddle. No one had heard him approach. Tucker scowled. This ain't your business, Tolbert. Water flows for all, Henry replied evenly. And this land's ownership is disputed. You know this. He guided his horse closer, eyes steady on Tucker's face. The old ones say blood shed over water brings many dry seasons. Collie noticed Tucker's men shifting uncomfortably. Henry's presence changed things, not just his rifle, but the weight of his words and the reminder that this land held deeper history than bank papers could claim. After a long moment, Tucker spat and waved to his men. Ain't worth getting shot over today. But we'll be back, Danner. With the law behind us next time. They gathered their tools and mounted up. Tucker pointed at the stakes they'd already driven in. Those stay. Consider it a warning. Collie watched them ride off, his hands clenched at his sides. Henry guided his horse alongside him. They will return, Henry said quietly. Wilkes does not give up easily when he wants something. I know. Collie ran a hand over his face. Much obliged for stepping in, Henry nodded. The creek sustained my people long before papers said who owned it. Now it sustains all our families. He touched his hat brim. Be careful, friend. Wilkes fights with paper and gold, not just guns. As Henry rode away, Collie studied the metal posts jutting from the earth like thorns. They had to come out, but first he needed to warn the girls. That evening, after supper was cleared, Kaylee gathered them all in the main room. Mercy lit the lamp while Clara settled the younger ones on the floor. Outside, wind rattled the windows as storm clouds gathered. There's trouble coming, Collie began carefully. Wilkes is trying to take the creek. His men started putting up fence today. Gasps and worried murmurs rose from the girls. Little Susie clutched her sister's arm, but he can't. Clara protested. Pa's deed shows we share the water rights with you. Wilkes claims he's got papers saying different. Collie's voice was grim. We need help from the law before this gets worse. Mercy stood quietly and retrieved her father's Bible from the shelf. Then we need to pray, she said firmly. Opening to Psalm 46, she began to read by lamplight. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, ... double quotes, the familiar words washed over them. Collie watched the girls' faces in the warm light, from 18-year-old Mercy to 6-year-old Susie, all bowed in prayer. Their simple faith steadied him, though he knew they needed more than prayer to stop Wilkes. When Mercy finished reading, Collie cleared his throat. We can't just wait for Wilkes to come back stronger. I'm writing to Judge Matthews in Rail City, asking for an urgent hearing. He needs to see Kent's deed and sort this proper. But Rail City's 2 days' ride, Ruth pointed out. I'll leave at first light tomorrow. Ride hard. I might catch the afternoon train. I'll go with you, Mercy offered quickly. You shouldn't travel alone, and I can speak to the judge about Pa's wishes. Callie shook his head. You need to stay here with your sisters. Clara's good with the cooking and chores, but they need you to keep things running. He saw the protest forming on her face and added gently, Your Pa trusted me to protect all of you. That means keeping you together and safe. Mercy subsided, though her expression remained worried. The younger girls huddled closer to her, sensing her concern. Later that night, after the girls had gone to bed, Callie sat at the kitchen table writing by lamplight. His hand, more used to reins and tools than pen and paper, moved slowly across the page as he carefully explained the situation to Judge Matthews. He included details about Kent's death, the deed, and Wilkes's attempts to seize the water rights. The lamp burned low as he worked, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind continued to rise, and somewhere in the darkness, coyotes called to each other. Callie could hear the creek's steady flow through the open window, the same creek that now threatened to tear everything apart. Finally, he signed his name and sealed the letter. Tomorrow he would ride to Rail City and set things in motion. A trial was coming, he knew, one that would decide not just the fate of the creek, but the future of this makeshift family he'd somehow acquired. He checked the locks on the doors and banked the fire for the night. As he passed the girl's room, he heard Mercy's voice softly singing a hymn to help Susie sleep. The simple sound caught in his chest, reminding him of all that was at stake. Callie paused in the hallway, listening to the familiar creaks and settling sounds of the house. When had this place stopped feeling empty? When had these girls' presence become as natural as breathing? In his room, he pulled Kent's deed from its tin box one more time, studying the careful script by candlelight. Tomorrow he would begin the fight to defend it, not just for the water rights, but for 6 girls who trusted him to keep their world from falling apart again. He tucked the deed safely away and blew out the candle. Outside his window, the creek continued its ancient song, unaware of the battle brewing over its waters. Days crept by like molasses in winter while they waited for news from Rail City. The Danner Ranch settled into an uneasy rhythm, every morning bringing fresh worry about what the mail might hold. Kylie noticed how the younger girls watched the horizon, their eyes tracking any distant rider that appeared. At breakfast, little Susie wouldn't let go of Kylie's sleeve while she ate her porridge. Ruth and Anna sat closer to him than usual, as if drawing strength from his presence. Even Lydia's usual humming had gone quiet. Time you girls learn more about running this ranch proper, Callie announced one morning, pushing back from the table. Can't just sit here fretting. Might as well make ourselves useful. Mercy looked up from where she was washing dishes. What did you have in mind? Figure we'll start with the basics. Harnessing the team, caring for stock, chopping wood. He stood, brushing crumbs from his shirt. Your pa taught you some, but there's always more to learn. The girls exchanged glances. Then Clara spoke up. Will you teach us to drive the wagon too? Reckon so, Callie nodded. Never hurts to know how. They filed out to the barn, their boots crunching on fresh snow. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and leather greeted them. Callie's 2 draft horses, Buck and Star, nickered softly in their stalls. First thing about harnessing, Callie began, lifting down the heavy leather collar, is doing it gentle but firm. Horses gotta trust you, but also respect you. The girls gathered close, watching intently as he demonstrated each step. Even little Susie paid attention, her earlier fear forgotten in the face of something new to learn. Ruth, you try now, Callie directed, helping her lift the harness. That's it. Easy does it. Talk to him while you work. Ruth's tongue poked out in concentration as she copied Callie's movements. Good boy, Buck, she murmured. You're being real patient with me. Over the next few days, Kali taught them everything he could think of. Mercy proved skilled with the axe, her strokes sure and steady as she split logs. Clara had a way with the chickens, coaxing better egg production than Kali had seen in months. Even shy Anna found her place, showing a natural touch with the sick calf they were nursing. You're holding that wrong, Kali corrected gently, adjusting Lydia's grip on the pitchfork. There you go. Now you won't tire so quick. The work seemed to steady them all. Physical labor left less room for worry, and small victories gave them confidence. Kali found himself taking pride in their progress, though he tried not to show it too plain. Sunday arrived clear and cold. They hitched the wagon early, everyone in their best clothes. This time, when they entered the church, Mercy headed straight for the organ while her sisters filled the front pew. Kali took his usual spot in back, hat in his hands. The first notes of Amazing Grace filled the small church, Mercy's playing sure and beautiful. The congregation fell silent, then joined in with surprising strength. Kali saw several people wiping eyes, moved by the music and the sight of the orphan girl serving God through her gift. Reverend Hodges stood to pray, his voice carrying to the rafters. Lord, we thank you for families forged in your providence, for hearts open to love beyond blood, for the strength you give us to bear one another's burdens. Kali kept his head bowed, but he felt the weight of meaning in those words. Around him, heads nodded in agreement. After service, instead of hurrying past with averted eyes, people stopped to greet them. Mrs. Peterson pressed a fresh apple pie into Clara's hands. The Wilson sisters brought a stack of warm quilts for the little ones. Even the sheriff's wife came over to praise. Mercy's playing. You're doing right by them girls. Kali, old Tom Wheeler said gruffly, clapping him on the shoulder. Kent would be proud. Kali mumbled thanks, unused to such approval. He helped load the gifts in the wagon, noting how the girls stood straighter, smiled more freely. Something had shifted in the town's heart toward them. That evening, as they sat around the supper table sharing Mrs. Peterson's pie, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Kali went to the door, hand near his gun, but it was just young Jimmy from the telegraph office. Message came for you, Mr. Danner, Jimmy said, holding out an envelope. From Rail City. Kali's hands were steady as he opened it, but his heart pounded. The girls gathered close, hardly breathing as he read. Judge Matthews has set a hearing, he announced finally. 2 weeks from Tuesday. 2 weeks? Mercy's voice quavered slightly. That's so soon. Sooner the better, Kali said firmly. Get this settled proper. But that night, after the girls had gone to bed, he sat alone by the dying fire. The weight of responsibility pressed heavy on his shoulders. 6 young lives depending on him. A ranch's future hanging on his words to the judge. He found himself doing something he hadn't done proper since Sarah died, praying hard and desperate. Lord, he whispered, don't let me fail these girls. They've lost enough already. Give me strength to see this through. Outside, snow began falling thick and steady. It covered the fence posts Wilkes's men had driven by the creek, buried the wagon tracks from their trip to church, softened the hard edges of the world. Like God's own blanket, Kali thought, covering old hurts and making everything new. Through the wall, he heard Mercy's voice singing her sisters to sleep with Abide With Me. The familiar hymn carried clear and sweet in the quiet house. Swift to its close ebbs out life's little day, earth's joys grow dim. Its glories pass away, change, and decay in all around. I see, O thou who changest not, abide with me. Kali sat listening until the last note faded. Then he banked the fire and headed to bed, knowing the next 2 weeks would test them all. But somehow, between the town's acceptance, the girls' determination, and the steady fall of cleansing snow, he felt a whisper of hope take root in his heart. The days before the hearing stretched long and tense. Morning frost painted the windows in delicate patterns, while inside, papers spread across the kitchen table like fallen leaves. Mercy sat beside Collie, her neat handwriting marking important passages in Kent's documents. "Father kept everything," she murmured, smoothing a wrinkled receipt. "Even notes from when he first bought the land 15 years ago." Collie nodded, studying a water rights agreement from before the railroad came. "Your pa was smarter than folks gave him credit for. These might save us all." In the corner, Clara's needle flashed in the lamplight. She had taken apart 2 of Kent's old shirts to make fresh collars for the younger girls' dresses. Her stitches were tiny and precise, each one a prayer for their future. "Stand still, Susie," she cautioned, pins held between her lips as she adjusted a hem. "Want you looking proper as any banker's child when we go to court." The little girl fidgeted, but obeyed, twirling her braid around one finger. "Will the judge be scary?" "Judges just want what's right," Collie answered from the table, his voice gentle but firm. "That's all we want, too." The crunch of hooves on frozen ground drew their attention. Henry Talbert's familiar silhouette appeared through the frosted glass. Collie went to welcome him, stamping his boots on the porch. "Brother," Henry greeted him, extending a leather folder. "I have prepared my testimony about the creek." Inside, the girls made space at the table as Henry spread out his papers. His writing mixed English and Comanche words, telling how his people had shared the water with Kent and Collie for generations. "Before Iron Horse came," Henry explained, pointing to dates, "Creek gave life to all. Comanche, settler, beast, and crop. The old ones say water knows no master." Collie's throat tightened with gratitude. "This means more than I can say, Henry. Standing with us like this." Henry's dark eyes were serious. "Standing for truth needs no thanks. My father and Kent Crawford made peace over that creek. Their word still holds weight." Clara brought coffee while they talked, the aromatic steam rising like hope in the winter air. The younger girls listened wide-eyed as Henry shared stories of how his grandfather had taught Kent's father where to dig the first wells. After Henry left, darkness gathered early as it does in winter. The younger girls went to bed, leaving Mercy and Clara to clean up the kitchen. Callie stepped outside to check the stock one last time. The sisters' voices drifted through the thin walls as he returned, making him pause on the porch. "There might be another way," Mercy was saying, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I went to work for Mr. Wilkes, keeping his books perhaps ... Mercy, no." Clara's horror was clear even through the wall. "You can't mean to offer yourself like that. If it kept us together? If it saved the land?" Mercy's voice shook. "I would do anything for you all. He's a cruel man," Clara pleaded. "You've seen how he treats people. Please don't even think of it." Callie's hand tightened on the doorframe. The thought of proud, gentle Mercy sacrificing herself to that snake Wilkes made his blood run cold. He pushed open the door harder than he meant to, making both girls jump. "How long have you been considering this?" he demanded, his voice rough with emotion. Mercy lifted her chin, though her hands trembled. "Someone has to do something. We can't just wait to lose everything." "No." Collie's single word cut through the air like a blade. "I won't allow it, but if it would help, it would destroy everything your father wanted for you." Collie stepped closer, his face stern but his eyes kind. "Kent trusted me to protect all 6 of you together, not to trade one for the others like cattle. The banker has so much power," Mercy whispered, tears finally spilling over. "What if we lose?" Collie put his weathered hands on her shoulders, steady as a mountain. "Then we lose together, standing right and true. But I aim to fight with everything I've got before that happens." Clara came to put her arms around her sister. "We need you here, Mercy. All of us need you. God brought us together," Collie said quietly. "I've been slow to see it, maybe, but I believe that now. We face this as a family." Mercy's shoulders shook as she finally let herself cry. Clara held her close while Callie awkwardly patted her back, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Promise me," he said gruffly. "No more thoughts of sacrificing yourself." "We'll find another way." She nodded against Clara's shoulder. "I promise." "Good." Callie cleared his throat. "Now both of you get some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough for more worrying." The girls dried their eyes and headed upstairs, leaving Callie alone in the kitchen. He stood for a long time staring at the scattered papers on the table. Deeds and water rights, testimonies and receipts. But it was the sound of Mercy's muffled sobs that echoed in his mind. 6 girls. 6 lives entrusted to his care. The weight of it pressed down like a physical thing, yet somehow it no longer felt like a burden. Instead, it was more like the weight of a rifle in his hands, heavy with purpose and responsibility, but necessary for protection. He gathered the papers carefully, tucking them away in Kent's old trunk. The creek rustled its eternal song outside, reminder of all they stood to lose. But Callie's jaw was set with determination as he blew out the lamp, let Wilk spring his schemes and threats. These girls were his family now, and he would defend them with everything he had. Dawn painted the eastern sky in pale streaks as Callie checked the wagon one final time. His breaths puffed wide in the frozen air while he adjusted the harnesses on his team. The leather creaked as he worked, familiar sounds that usually brought comfort. Today they only reminded him of all that hung in the balance dot behind him. The house door opened. Mercy emerged first, carrying a basket of bread and dried meat for the journey. Clara followed with the younger girls, all of them wrapped in their warmest shawls. They had sewn patches on their coats and pressed their dresses the night before, determined to appear respectable. "Everyone ready?" Callie asked, helping little Sarah up onto the wagon seat. The 6-year-old nodded solemnly, clutching her rag doll. "We packed Kent's Bible and all the papers," Mercy confirmed, settling the basket under the seat. Her face was pale but composed as she helped her sisters climb aboard. The wagon wheels crunched through fresh snow as they set out. Callie kept the team at a steady pace, mindful of the treacherous footing. The girls huddled together under quilts in the wagon bed, their breath forming small clouds in the winter air. Around mid-morning, when the sun had climbed higher, Clara started humming softly. One by one, her sisters joined in, their sweet voices carrying across the empty prairie. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Callie felt his throat tighten at the familiar hymn. He remembered his wife Caroline singing it on summer evenings, before the fever took her. Now these girls filled his silent world with music again. They stopped at noon to rest the horses and eat. The girls spread a quilt on the snow, sharing out bread and strips of dried venison. Callie checked the team's hooves while they ate, scraping out packed snow. "How much further, Mr. Danner?" 10-year-old Beth asked, brushing crumbs from her dress. "We'll make town by nightfall, God willing," he answered. "The Reverend's expecting us." They continued on as afternoon shadows lengthened. The girls sang more hymns, their voices growing quieter as fatigue set in. Even 8-year-old Mary, usually bubbling with energy, dozed against Clara's shoulder. Dusk was falling when they finally spotted the town's church steeple rising above the trees. Lamplight glowed in windows as Callie guided the wagon down the main street. A few townspeople paused to watch them pass, their faces curious but not unkind. Reverend Hodges stood waiting at the church steps, his breath visible in the cold air. "Welcome, welcome," he called, hurrying to help them down. "I've got the hall warm and ready for you all." The church hall was indeed warm, with a pot of stew bubbling on the stove and pallets laid out with clean blankets. The girls' exhaustion showed as they ate, but their manners remained perfect. "We're grateful for your kindness, Reverend," Mercy said, helping to clear the bowls away. "It's the least I can do," he replied. "I'll be testifying tomorrow myself, about Kent's character and his wishes for you girls." After the meal, Mercy gathered her sisters. Shall we pray together? They knelt in a circle on the wooden floor, their faces serious in the lamplight. Mercy's clear voice led them in Rock of Ages, the melody rising to the rafters. Rock of Ages, cleft for me. Let me hide myself in the ... The other girls joined in, their harmonies weaving together like a tapestry of hope. Even little Sarah knew the words, her small voice pure and true. The hymn's final notes lingered in the air like a blessing. Kali helped tuck the younger ones into their pallets, noting how Clara whispered reassurances to Mary about tomorrow. Mercy sat longer by the stove, reading Kent's Bible by lamplight until her eyes grew heavy. Long after the girls had drifted off, Callie lay awake on his own pallet near the door. The church's old walls creaked in the winter wind, and somewhere an owl called softly. His thoughts drifted to Caroline, to the terrible day he had laid her in the frozen ground 12 years ago. He had been so sure then that all joy had died with her, yet here he was, surrounded by sleeping children who had somehow become his own. 6 girls who needed him, who filled his days with purpose and his nights with prayers. How strange were God's ways, bringing family to him through loss and duty and trust. The town clock struck midnight, its chimes muffled by snow. Kali finally closed his eyes, letting the girl's soft breathing lull him towards sleep. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. Tonight, he could rest in the knowledge that he wasn't facing them alone. Morning came too soon, gray light seeping through frosted windows. The girls dressed carefully in their freshened clothes, helping each other with buttons and braids. Mercy pinned up her dark hair severely, making her look older than her 8 years. Remember what we practiced, Clara whispered, straightening Sarah's collar. Stand straight and speak clear if the judge asks you anything. They walked together to the courthouse, their boots leaving tracks in the new snow. Already townsfolk were gathering, stamping their feet on the steps and talking in low voices. They fell quiet as Callie's family approached, many nodding respectfully. Inside, the courthouse smelled of wood smoke and floor polish. Wooden benches filled quickly as more people arrived. Callie recognized faces from church, from the general store, from neighboring ranches. Not all were friendly, but most seemed supportive. Mr. Wilkes stood near the front with his lawyer, both men in fine dark suits. The banker's face was smooth and confident as he consulted his papers. He barely glanced at the girls as they filed into their seats. Sheriff Matthews stopped by their bench, touching his hat brim. "Morning, Danner," he said quietly. His steady gaze took in the girl's neat appearance and dignified bearing. "Quite a family you've got there. Much obliged, Sheriff," Callie replied, reading the unspoken support in the lawman's eyes. The community was indeed watching, and they would remember how justice was served today. The bailiff called for all to rise as the judge entered. Callie felt Mercy's hand slip into his as they stood. Her fingers were cold but steady, like her father Kent's had been that last day at the fence line. He squeezed gently, a silent promise to keep fighting for them all. The judge settled into his chair, arranged his papers, and looked out over the crowded room. The heavy silence held all their hopes and fears, all their prayers and preparations. The final battle for their family was about to begin. The courthouse fell silent as Wilkes' lawyer rose, his polished boots clicking against the wooden floor. "Your Honor, this so-called deed is nothing but a desperate forgery," he declared, waving the paper dismissively. Kent Crawford died in debt, barely able to feed his children. He was in no position to grant guardianship or water rights. Collie's hands tightened on his worn hat as the lawyer continued. "These girls should be made wards of the county, placed with proper families. And that creek? The railroad's development will bring prosperity to all." When his turn came, Callie stood slowly. His voice was quiet but firm as he presented Kent's will. "Your Honor, Kent Crawford trusted me with his daughter's care. This document proves it." The judge adjusted his spectacles, examining the will with careful attention. His weathered fingers traced the signatures while the courtroom held its breath. Henry Talbert stepped forward next, his bearing dignified in his best coat. "That creek has watered both settler and Comanche cattle for generations," he explained. "We share it in peace, as neighbors should. The railroad's plan would leave good ranches to wither." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Several older ranchers nodded in agreement, impressed by Henry's measured words and fair-minded testimony. Reverend Hodges rose last, carrying the leather-bound church register. "If it please the court," he said, opening to a marked page, "Kent Crawford came to me months ago. He recorded his intentions here, naming Callie Danner as guardian should anything befall him." The girls sat perfectly still on their bench, hands clasped tightly together. Mercy's lips moved in silent prayer, while Clara kept a protective arm around little Sarah. The younger ones watched wide-eyed as the adults decided their fate. "I will consider all evidence presented," the judge announced, gathering his papers. "This court will reconvene tomorrow morning for my decision." Callie guided his makeshift family back through the snowy streets to the church hall. The girls moved quietly, lost in their own thoughts. Inside, Clara and Mercy worked together to prepare a simple supper of bread and soup. They gathered around the table, heads bowed as Reverend Hodges offered grace. "Lord, we place our trust in your wisdom and mercy," he prayed. "Guide those who judge, comfort those who wait." The evening passed slowly. The younger girls tried to play quiet games while Mercy read from Kent's Bible. But tension hung heavy in the air, broken only by occasional whispered prayers and the crackling of the stove. Fired-up morning sunlight streamed through the courthouse windows as people pressed shoulder to shoulder inside. The judge settled into his chair, adjusting his spectacles before clearing his throat. "Having reviewed all evidence," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner, "I find Kent Crawford's will and the church record valid and binding. Callie Danner is hereby confirmed as legal guardian to all 6 Crawford daughters." He paused, lifting another document. "Furthermore, the creek rights shall remain jointly held between the Crawford claim and the Danner Ranch, as originally deeded." The courtroom erupted in excited chatter. Several ranchers clapped Callie on the back while the girls burst into tears of joy, wrapping their arms around him. Wilkes stormed toward the door, his face red with humiliation. Outside in the crisp morning air, neighbors gathered to offer congratulations. The sheriff approached, extending his hand. "You've proved yourself a man of honor, Danner." Callie felt weeks of worry lifting from his shoulders. Beside him, Mercy whispered through her tears, "We're safe." That evening in the church hall, Callie knelt by the crackling fire. "Thank you, Lord," he prayed softly, his heart full. The girls lay sleeping peacefully nearby, finally secure since losing their father. Townspeople waved farewell as Callie guided the wagon homeward, baskets of food and warm blankets tucked around the girls. The winter sun cast long shadows across the snow, but their hearts were light with victory. "Come spring, we should plant more beans," Ruth declared. "And maybe watermelons, too." Anna chimed in about chickens, while Lydia hummed a cheerful tune. Susie nestled closer to Clara, already planning where to hang her new quilt. Callie listened, amazed at how naturally they spoke of tomorrow. These weren't temporary guests anymore. They were planning a future together. Night had fallen when they reached the ranch. Lamplight soon warmed the windows as they carried their belongings inside. Mercy carefully placed their father's deed on the mantel, her fingers lingering on the paper that secured their home. Clara stirred a hearty stew while the younger girls decorated the table with fresh pine boughs they'd gathered. After supper, they gathered near the fire, voices rising in familiar hymns. The harmony filled every corner of the once quiet house as the little ones dozed off. Mercy touched Callie's arm. "Thank you," she whispered, "for standing by us." "All 6 of you are mine," Callie replied, his voice rough with emotion. "And I am yours." Tears fell freely, but his heart was at peace. The March winds gentled into April breezes as winter loosened its grip on the land. Snowdrifts melted into muddy puddles around the Danner Ranch, feeding the newly freed creek that gurgled past their property. Callie worked from sunrise to sunset, the girls always nearby, mending fences, preparing soil for spring plantings, and helping wobbly newborn calves find their feet. More wagons rolled up their lane these days, bringing neighbors with seedlings to share or fresh-baked bread. The community had embraced them, treating the unusual family as if they'd always been one. One crisp Sunday morning, Reverend Hodges held service in their freshly swept barn. Sunlight streamed through the rafters as he blessed their household, his words echoing off the wooden walls. Henry Tallbird stood beside Callie, honored as both friend and brother in their growing family circle. That evening, Callie gazed around his table at 6 bright faces illuminated by lamplight. Their laughter filled every corner of the home that had once echoed with his loneliness. Together, their voices rose in a familiar hymn, drifting out into the starlit night. In his heart, Callie renewed his promise to raise these daughters with all the love and honor he possessed, grateful for God's mysterious ways. If something in this story whispered to your spirit, stay a while. Subscribe and come back tomorrow. The next story may be the one you didn't know you needed.